Um, Welcome everybody to another episode of Marketeers Clubhouse. I'm Jamie Kalon. I've got one of Canada's greatest athletes all time in the clubhouse today, and thankfully he's one of my favorite people. His name's Michael Smith. He was a decathlete extraordinaire, and one of the most amazing times in Canadian sport to watch Michael and his career. So I got a bunch of questions. Mike, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're both, for everyone, we're both actually, Mike was from Lake of the Woods-esque area in Canada, which is in Ontario, so more East Coast. I was always in Canada. Mike, you and I, or in Calgary, you and I met through a mutual sponsor of ours, Oakley, the sunglass company. I was a cyclist and I was at the end of my career and it sort of just transitioned out while you were still very much in the heyday of your running career and decathlon world, running, throwing, jumping, everything career, because decathlon's literally insane. And I quickly was very captivated by what a nice guy you are, how smart you are, your approach to training, your approach to how you dealt with your sponsors, how present you were literally in every conversation, which is, in a nutshell, amazing athlete aside, is just who you are. You're this very present and complete human. So, I'm very fortunate to call you one of my best friends, and we don't get to see each other as much as as much as I would like. You're a family man, and you got all sorts of business stuff cooking, which we'll chat about those things. But anyways, going back to the start, like, marketing is a real big thing. And I want to dwell just for a few minutes on how effective you were in the world of marketing with your sponsors, and how there's so many people, like, I get approached weekly by somebody, oh, my kid is this and they're really good. Could you hook them up with Oakley? Can you do this? Oh, my son is a big backcountry ski guy. Can you use your contacts, get someone at North Face to sponsor them, and all these types of things. And the path isn't that easy. And it specifically wasn't very easy for you because in those days, Olympics were treated not necessarily as a pro sport, especially athletics, field athletics. So how did you, beyond being very masterful and being the best, because you were amazing at your sports, how did you, like, you became an outstanding icon of what a sponsored Olympic athlete could look like, specifically in Canada? Like, it was a hard market. How did that work?
Well, I was super fortunate that I was introduced to kind of a platform, an ecosystem, a scenario where I was noticed as just a good all around athlete. From my small town of Kenora, Ontario, I played every sport you can imagine, and but I ultimately gravitated towards track and field. I really enjoyed the individual aspect. I love team sports. I love football, volleyball, basketball, baseball. I played all those sports pretty well, pretty athletic. But I was really drawn to track and field. And then I was recruited by the Canadian Olympic track and field coach who focused on decathlon, 10 events track and field. He came to my home in Kenora, Ontario, in August of 1985, a week before school started, my last year of high school, and he convinced me to move to Toronto and try this crazy sport called decathlon because I was decent at a couple of the 10 events already. but I was tall, I was fast, I was athletic. So he thought I would be decent at decathlon, more than decent. And he was true. He was correct. And ultimately, I became one of the top 10 decathletes in the world. But the sponsorship marketing side of things was really, in compared to now, in its very early stages of development. I remember doing well at the Ontario High School track and field meet called OFSA, Ontario Federation of Secondary School Athletic Association, a big track meet, only larger track meets in North America for high school track and field was California and Texas, the California Relays, Texas Relays. So Ontario has a tremendous ecosystem of track and field talent, a large participation rate. And those were early days, call it the early 80s, early days of Nike. And I won the junior boys division on my own. I won 2 golds and a silver as an individual, let alone a school. So I won the junior boys school division, and I won a pair of cool Nike spikes, probably worth about $45 at the time, which is a lot of money. And I remember winning my new shoes, and I thought that was cool. And that was in the spring. And then in the fall, when I got recruited to join University of Toronto Track Club, moved to Toronto, tried decathlon, there was a big affiliation with Adidas
Mm.
with the University of Toronto. So I literally gave up my Nike shoes. And I was introduced to the Adidas people, and they gave me a bunch of new shoes. The decathlete needs a lot of shoes. So that was my earliest kind of personal integration involvement with a brand and with marketing. And Adidas back in the day was just and Nike identified talented athletes and gave them gear, and then ones that performed well, ultimately and eventually, perhaps you could get a couple of dollars in addition to the actual clothing or shoes, and primarily athletic wear that these companies were offering. And you can imagine that in the 80s, and Phil Knight running around trying to get athletes to wear Nike shoes, and Horst and Adi Dassler of Puma and Adidas were really well established brand from Europe since the mid 1900s, and a really dynamic sense of brands just percolating to the top. And now today, you're wearing an Asics top. We know what Under Armour's done. We know what a handful of other brands, Reebok included, have done. It's just quite phenomenal what's evolved over the last, call it 30, 40 years as far as sports brand marketing. And I can remember when Adidas actually gave me a monetary contract in addition to all the gear. It was in the late 80s, early 90s. And my 2 main competitors were Dan O'Brien and Dave Johnson, 2 American decathletes. And they were a part of the Reebok ecosystem. And I remember at the time, Reebok committed $20 million to this pretty high-end marketing campaign with TV commercials, poster ads, billboards. And now a $20 million spend is kind of an afterthought in regards to some sports marketing brands and athletes being signed, et cetera. So for me to see those early days to what it is now, and athletes signing multi-million dollar contracts with apparel and shoe companies is quite astounding from a marketing perspective. I'm just really privileged to have seen that evolution as you did, Jamie. It's really quite fascinating where we've come in the last kind of 40 years around that space.
Yeah, it's interesting because anyone who looks at Olympic athletes and stuff now sees something completely different. Like most Olympic athletes live at the poverty level, very close to it. I don't think, let's say, okay, the bulk of the pro snowboarders that make the Olympics probably don't, although that industry is cratering and it's hard for them to make money.
Yeah.
But like freestyle skiers, a long jumper, like a long jumper, just straight long jumper, or just a straight person who throws discus, or, these things, if you're not the best, you're barely making a living, which means you're a truck driver, or you are a guy who works in a warehouse, or you've got a you're a white collar day job guy. Like, there's most people lose that. They see the glitz in the Olympics and this like amateur sport level thing, but they've really, they're thinking that the hockey players and the discus player are equal, or
Mm-hmm.
the discus thrower, and they're
Yeah.
not. Like the guy who's throwing discus is like lucky.
And commitment and workouts, they'd be the same, but on a monetary or lifestyle perspective, couldn't be farther from different, right?
Yeah, they're wildly off.
Yeah,
Like, they're not even close.
yeah.
And so I feel like you, especially where you were, and specifically in that, like, there is, like, is there professional decathletes? Is that even a thing?
Well, here's a quick synopsis on the professionalization of track and field. Like track and field was every sport has a governing body: the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, soccer, swimming, track and field all have their governing bodies. It used to be called the IAAF, the International Association of Amateur Athletics Federation, IAAF. So it was amateur was actually in the name of the governing body. You had to maintain your amateur status to
Mm-hmm.
compete at the Olympic level, which was unsustainable from its original ideation of when the Olympics began in the late 1800s, 1896 into the early 1900s. The amateur status was kind of held as the golden mark of athleticism. You're a pure committed athlete, don't get paid to do it. And as we all know, couldn't be further from the truth today. People who commit and compete in any sport at a very high level takes a tremendous amount of professional commitment. So how track and field kind of evolved from the pure amateur status, all the countries that were involved in track and field had to help their athletes maintain their quote unquote amateur status. So any prize money that you won, any sponsorship capital that you were given had to be put into a trust fund. And that trust fund
Hmm.
could maintain your amateur status. You could withdraw on that trust fund for training related purposes
Hmm.
to maintain your lifestyle as an athlete. But that was the whole kind of hack around amateurism. It has subsequently got shuffled off the table. It doesn't exist anymore. Everyone recognizes the fact that this is a professional vocation. It is a time commitment professional vocation. And that trust fund that used to exist, that I actually was very fortunate to put money into a trust, you could grow that trust by investing the dollars, withdraw a little bit at a time, and be taxed on that small piece that you withdrew. But this whole nest egg could grow tax free until you withdrew it. So again, that was another one of my kind of curious vocation, pastimes, interest in finance, which kind of morphed into my athletic career. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the evolution of amateurism in track and field, and I've seen it replicated in almost every sport now. Swimming, gymnastics, track and field seem to be the main core sports of the Olympic Games, and then every other sport is kind of built around those three main core sports because they take a lot of time, have a lot of events, a lot of participants, a lot of different scale and scope of athletes participate in track and field, swimming, gymnastics. So those are the core sports of the Olympic Games, and then everything else kind of fills in the gap as far as I'm concerned. And all of those athletes have to adhere to this kind of status of amateurism as it used to be, is now morphed into something completely different. And each individual country would have a different perspective on what that amateur status means.
Mm.
So there's a brief little history on the amateurism of Olympic sport versus a professionalization of it.
Yeah, well, and classically, the Russians' version of an amateur is highly different than Canada's. Or
100%. And I was really fortunate that I lived on the bridge in time with the Soviet Union, East Germans, the Eastern Bloc, which I competed against in the 80s. The wall came down in 1989, and then the next Olympic Games in 1992, all of those athletes were now part of a democratic country, and so that metamorphosis from communism to democracy, I saw unfold live. I saw amateur professionalism unfold live,
Right.
and thus marketing and sports marketing woven through that massive societal transition around sport. So it was a really interesting kind of bridge in time that you and I both, got to experience from the mid to late 80s through the 90s. The wall came down into 2000, into the 2020s now, where we see, high school, 16-year-old high school basketball players with a highlight reel of an hour and being pumped out to not only NCAA schools, but also, apparel and shoe sponsors as well. So the whole game is completely changed and metamorphosized in our lifetime. So it's just fascinating to see.
Does your brand need some help in the trade marketing department? Manage your sales tools with Regulator's easy-to-use features. Whether it's fixtures or displays, POP, custom art or promo products, you can submit single or bulk orders for all your locations within minutes, using a simple, streamlined process. Deliver content, manage your budget and view the market, all from the palm of your hand. Move up to 10 times faster than your competitors and capture all the opportunities that put your brand on top. Visit brandregulator.com for more information.
I remember when I got my carded athlete status as a
Mm-hmm.
cyclist, and it was game changing because there was this small amount of money that came, but along with it came sports psychologists, which, to be honest, is one of the greatest benefits I ever got out of the national team system.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple things. The business cards, because I could walk around and gather up sponsors way better with a little dumb piece of, I have one somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it was the key for me to walk in anywhere and upgrade my sponsorships
Mm-hmm.
from these small companies. That was amazing. And then the sports psychologist was fundamentally game changing on 1,000 different things, which
Yeah.
is nowadays, I think, super commonplace, is that they would, that the athlete's mental preparation is as high and as good as the physical preparation. And back then, in my world, it was you're just doing ridiculous, insane driving workout after driving workout. No mental prep or very little mental prep, no actual forethought into rest times and all that stuff. Not really at the level that it is now. It was just the very beginning of sports science, not actually
100%.
sports science yet.
100%. And I like to think of myself, to be honest, as a bit of a pioneer in that realm, just because I was in an environment that could nurture all of those things. I was at the University of Toronto Track Club, which was based at one of the top academic universities in the country, and I had access to PhDs in biomedicine to do blood analysis, urine analysis, hair analysis for my mineral absorption and content. I had some of the top sports psychologists in the country who worked out of Southern Ontario, who now have affiliations with Queen's University School of Business. There's a former sports psychologist of mine who historically he did a lecture series for a week at an executive MBA program at Queen's, which is a highly regarded Canadian university. And it was the most popular subject during an executive MBA program as per the students. They ranked all of their experiences, and this sports psychologist delivered content that was incredibly relevant to people doing their executive MBA, because what it's about, what an athlete's kind of raison d'etre is high performance, is trying to get the most out of yourself. We put all this physical training, mental training on the table, and what are we trying to do? We're trying to achieve our ultimate performance, our ultimate goals. And same on the executive MBA program. How can I be a better CEO, a better manager, a better CFO? A lot of those things rhyme, and a lot of the applications of psychological discipline rhyme for both an athletic performance and a business performance, call it, and a life performance. It bleeds into all aspects of your life. So I couldn't agree with you more. The exposure to that next level of just pure physical workouts. Who can work out the hardest? That's an important part of the foundation of sport performance, but it's only one piece. Probably a more important layer, even underneath that, kind of who can work out the most and the hardest, has to be supported by rest and recovery. If you can do 1 or 2 really hard workouts in a row, that's awesome. But who can do 300 in a row in a fashion that's not 110% every day, because that's called periodization. Your body has to go in ebbs and flows and waves. But that's what we were as track and field athletes. We didn't get to, go head to head, a wide receiver and a defensive back, a baseball pitcher and a batter. It was us against gravity and a clock. So we had all the variables of that equation were off the table, and it was all about the physical ability of the athlete. And the physical ability of the athlete is directly reflected in the 3.5 years of workouts you did for each Olympic Games, right? So I look at myself as a bit of a pioneer, just because I was an athletic homesteader with a bunch of really good people around me, PhD biomedicist, psychologist. In my opinion, the top track and field coaches in the country were based out of the University of Toronto. So I had this laboratory, which was just ripe, and I leveraged it really hard. And I had a tremendous, back to the marketing side, a tremendous agent.
Yeah.
Who did all the heavy lifting from a sports marketing perspective for me. My coach did initially with those conversations with Adidas early on, but then I had an agent who just knew the landscape, knew me as a person and my demeanor and what I'd be attracted to. And he matched me up with sponsors that we resonated together, and Oakley being a perfect example. And that's where we met. And when we first met, we can joke about this. I think Oakley had 3 SKUs, 3 products.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, literally.
Right. So as much as Oakley has evolved and changed as a single, sport related company, now the best surf brand in the world, hundreds, if not thousands of SKUs of different products. Like, as much change that's occurred in Oakley is the same amount of change that's happened in track and field and sports marketing. It's a good analog for the metamorphosis of sports marketing, isn't it? Like 3, they had frog skins, M frames, and one other item, I think, and that was it. Yeah. and then Oakley became Oakley.
It changed real quick. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
There's cheating everywhere in sport. When I
Mm.
was an athlete, I was at a national team camp. I was invited to go on I was killing it. I was invited to go on the vitamin program by a random doctor that was at the camp. And I didn't understand it. To be honest, I was I still am. I'm very naive. And I was like, no, I don't need vitamins. I'm good. Like, I'm fine. I didn't go on the vitamin program. A couple other people did. They just went off the charts. And I could see, I obviously knew a little deeper into the conversation with this doctor what the vitamin program was, and I wanted nothing to do with it. As a clean athlete, and you probably were in the best position ever, because the Russians were not clean athletes, barely are clean athletes in a lot of circumstances, minus their ballerinas because they don't want them big and bulky, but I'm sure they're on something. But your world was a dirty world you were performing in, specifically in that time. And you were able to do it as just a really unique human specimen. You are a very big, strong man. You are just like, you're built differently. When you and I are together, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 190 pounds, and you make me look like a little boy. Like you are just a way bigger man. Your What was in your head when, because I'm sure you knew that your competitors were cheating through different points of your career. You would have recognized this very quickly later in your career, when it started to become really prevalent. What goes through your head as, I know what went through my head as an athlete at that point, because it seems, to be honest, it doesn't necessarily pay. It does very long term. But I know what went through my head. What went through your head when you saw accelerated performance based on drugs in your competitors?
Yeah, boy, was I naive, Jamie. Like I was born and raised small town Ontario. Played a bunch of different sports, hung out outside, loved to fish and hunt, and I just, rose-colored glasses is an understatement. Like I just had no clue about the world of international Olympic sport. And then I was recruited to Toronto, and again, just fortuitously, University of Toronto, the ecosystem, that the head coach that recruited me, within the first 3 days of me arriving, I met all the other coaches, and it wasn't preachy, but it was just a stated fact that University of Toronto ran a clean, high performance center, and that just meant no anabolic steroids is what that meant. Full stop. There's
At the time, yeah.
at the time, like that was the unspoken truth of sport, is that some people used anabolic steroids and to recover and to train, and some didn't. And University of Toronto decided they didn't. And it was a societal choice of University of Toronto Track Club that this is who we're going to be. And I can just say flat out, not the university itself, but the people training at York University under Charlie Francis and Ben Johnson and Angela Isajenko, who were my teammates at my first Olympic Games, Canadian teammates. They came from a completely different camp. Charlie had a core entrenched coaching belief that you couldn't succeed, let alone win, without drugs. Like Charlie, that was his de facto mental decision. And he was responsible for exposing a lot of athletes to steroids. I can look at this from an arm's length perspective now as a 56-year-old guy, but even years ago, I had a contextual perspective of what that meant to me as an athlete. And I can't point fingers, because if I was recruited as a sprinter into Charlie's ecosystem, even with my lovely parents and lovely humble upbringings in small town Ontario, I can't definitively say that I would not have listened to Charlie. And I have East German friends and Russian friends who I know, when they went on a training camp and they sat at their position at where they were assigned to sit for their meals, and there were pills for them to take and vitamin injections for them to get, they weren't in a position to morally or ethically have an opinion.
No, they didn't get an opinion.
They didn't get an opinion. They were, and so it was, again, with time and perspective and context, it's just fascinating point in time that we moved through, with the wall coming down and all the exposure of a very regulated drug dispensing protocol that the Eastern Bloc just adhered to. And what they did was give athletes as much of an advantage as they can without being caught. So they tried to duck around the testing system. When does it clear? What kind of diuretics can you take to flush out your system? So that was a whole other, and I'm so blessed and lucky that I didn't have that. I can't imagine that mental duress and stress of having to deal with that.
Yeah, it's literally why I didn't, because I couldn't handle it.
Like as much as, but here's the funny thing, like, and we'd have to dig it up and look for the actual reference, but I remember, an ad hoc survey being held by Olympic athletes. If you could take a supplement, legal or illegal, that guaranteed you weren't caught and guaranteed that you won a gold medal, it was astounding the percentage that said, it was like 75% of the athletes said, I would do that. So again, it's more of a societal question than a personal question at this point. It's like, this is what we've created with this little festival we call the Olympics, that it doesn't really stress individual excellence. Because I had my fair share of medals, but I know some guys who didn't ever finish in the top 10, but they got everything they possibly could out of their body, and they went on to like become doctors and lawyers and engineers, and all that learning from sport of discipline and focus and work, they were able to utilize that in the second chapter of their adult life. And then there's other athletes that were all in, overcommitted. That was the only aspect of their life, and they had a really hard time post athletic career. So again, the cheating versus not cheating is just one piece of this kind of really big equation, right? In a human's experience on this planet. So.
From brand development to simple market executions, 54 Blue helps brands of all sizes grow with sustainability in mind. Their full-stack range of services include print, fabrication, design, web, interactive, content marketing, brand consulting, creative strategy, and more. Join some of the world's largest brands and lean on 54 Blue for your next go-to-market. Visit 54blue.com for more information.
See, it's really interesting. And I believe this. I gravitate towards people who pick suffering as a way of life. So, like my best friends are people who have suffered for very little gain, whether it's mountain bike, like you go climb a mountain bike up a, 2,000 meter mountain climb.
Yeah.
There's nobody waiting up top to cheer you on. There's no, like, it generally gets worse and worse. The weather gets worse and worse. Your body is annihilated. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But there's this thing that exists out of athletes, and not all. I don't see it necessarily out of, I've got some, hockey player friends that have played pretty high hockey, and the level of suffering doesn't exist there that I've seen. There's certain things in team sports. Basketball players, there's not a ton of suffering. There's high skill, there's athleticism, there's all these things. You had to suffer. You suffered on a track by yourself in the cold, day after day after day after day after day. And that's what you did. And there was no relenting. There was no woe is me. It's just you'd strap your shoes on to your frozen feet with your frozen fingers, and you would go run laps until you were sick in the garbage can.
Yeah.
And there's just something interesting behind that. And, I've said this to a couple of people. I go, unless you've had to stand in front of someone and pee in a cup after you've done a gut-wrenching human endeavor, and you have to then perform again by peeing in front of somebody into a cup, and they literally sit there and just like watch it. They're just like, okay, what's going on down there? And it's like, unless you've had to do that, there's like a real different thing, because it's just like, it's kind of crap stacked on top of crap. And how many times have you had to pee into a cup? Like it's like hundreds, maybe, Mike, literally. And, like I've got dozens and dozens of those under me, and it's like, there's just something, like, it's a different thing. What that athlete puts themselves through, it's so different.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jamie. And I think it is part of the human condition, where there are some people who gravitate towards that. You and I are certainly two of those. That not all athletes get as much out of that aspect of sport than an endurance athlete would, per se, or sports and the chosen vocations. But subsequent to my athletic career, I'm just a curious person, and have stumbled across different philosophies, but Stoicism as we know it, and Stoic thought is very synonymous with what you described. It's working hard for the sake of working hard, and I really think that it's a part of human nature that some people are harder wired. I think we're all hardwired with it, but some people are harder wired with it, if that's a thing. That kind of work and suffering, which would appear to be with no end ultimate result to be attainable, but there's something to it, right? Like, and we did it at a very competitive sport aspect, but I know some quote unquote recreational athletes that suffer more than anyone could ever, and there's something about it, right? And it's somehow motivating, it's somehow quote unquote enlightening. It's there's something to it, that suffering aspect of hard work and completing it is there's a fulfilling factor to it. So it again, it's a weird double-edged sword. It's a very strange double-edged sword.
I agree. I call it primal. It's satiating that primal need to suffer, and the more you can suffer, the easier everything else. And FYI, anybody looking to read a good book, go read The Obstacle is the Way. It's unbelievable. It is directly on the topic that Mike is speaking about. It is a brilliant bit of Stoic writing, with tons of great modern examples of how to get around problems in life and all these different things. This is a beautiful way to look at stuff.
And that's Ryan Halliday, correct?
Yeah, he's got that. He's got a bunch of books. He's probably the best modern philosopher that exists on the planet today, or really close to one of the best. And he links modern. He's not just pulling from, like the ancient Greeks or Marcus Aurelius or all these stuff that is old. He is comparing these things to Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and like modern things that happen in our real world. How does this work if you own a startup? How does this work if you are an athlete? How does this, like, it's very good.
Family, right? It has multiple applications. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's brilliant. In fact, I've bought about 20 copies or 30 copies ish off of Amazon. I did an employee review with one of my employees at 54 Blue, and along with his great review, because he's a great employee, he got a set of those books. He got The Obstacle's the Way, Your Ego's Your Enemy, and sorry, the third one escapes me.
All great content.
Like it's all great.
And so I'm excited for the 21st century athlete, and I know there are a bunch of them that again, you and I were pioneers in that thinking just because of our vintage. But there's young athletes that have the opportunity to be exposed to this type of thinking, this type of medical protocols and sports psychology and training regimes that we were just trying to science out 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But now it's becoming more and more sound every year. And again, with the ultimate kind of achievement is just trying to get the most out of your personal self as you possibly can. That's the journey, right? That is the journey. And and I can see a number of and back to sports marketing is a lot of athletes are focused around their influence as an athlete, which is one aspect of perhaps their growth and their achievement. And sometimes I can see, in my opinion, too much of a focus on that and not enough on the athletic performance and achievement. and there has to be a balance, and every personality is different. But the reason for sport is to challenge yourself in so many ways, and there's an aspect of it in modern day that is a little bit skewed, perhaps.
We're not here for the high rollers, snooty wine critics, or long-haul collectors, but we do think it's about time wine cellars turned into swoon-worthy works of art. Our experienced designers will bring your dream wine cellar to life, fitting any sized space and aesthetic requirements in your home. Our craftsmen carefully hand-build your cellar to give you a wine storage space that really feels like you. Visit themoderncellar.com for more information.
Goals.
Yeah, it's definitely broken the balance between performance, influence, and humanity. It's generally the humanity component that pays the price between those two, because they need if they want to actually be good, they have to perform. If they actually want to be popular, they have to influence. But they don't leave enough time in what you did really well and what I tried to do, although I didn't even get close to your height in as far as an athletic career, but just being a good human. And some, don't get me wrong, there's anomalies against this where they do, but the balance of those three things is so important. That's why sponsors latch on to people that are good. They're clean, they try, and they influence, and that just becomes this amazing thing, right? This package that is undeniably attractive. And I try to help the young guys and girls that are trying to get sponsors and do all this stuff. I'm like, you're focusing on really kind of the wrong stuff. Like, yeah, okay, you maybe won a ski event or a snowboard event or a bike thing. Anyone can perform on any given day. And if you stopped tomorrow, no one will know who you are. I hate, sorry, happened to me. I literally podiumed at nationals, dropped the mic, walked away as a pro, and literally the next year when I went to nationals just to watch, 10 people knew who I was. Right? And the reality is that there's no, in just pure performance, there is no longevity. So the influence is important. But it's the being a good person that keeps people wanting to bring you back into their world. And that has happened with you. And I've watched you do it beautifully. You've gone from being an athlete, you carried forward this commentary career that you've had, which is great. I get to hear my friend at the Olympics everywhere all the time. It's great. But you then transition that into what some of your hobbies were when you were an athlete, your finance career and these things, which sort of leads to where's Mike at now? You've done a bunch of stuff that, nobody knows. Everyone knows Mike Smith up to the commentary stuff, and you just go through. But you are a really dynamic person in the world of finance, in the world of startup companies. And you are by far the best networking capable human that I've ever met. And that goes back to your ability to perform, be a good person, and also influence. And so where are you now? What are you doing? I don't know how much you can talk about your current ventures, but there's no reason, unless you got a reason not to, I won't, poke at that. But what are you doing?
Post my athletic career. So my last major competition was 1998. I can't believe it's that long ago, but 1998, 25 years ago. At the Commonwealth Games, and I was fortunate, through the 90s, especially, that I had corporate sponsors, Oakley being a great one. Corporate sponsors, prize money, build up a nest egg in a trust fund. Like the vast majority, 99.9% of Olympic athletes, I had a little bit of a nest egg capital cash available to me, that I wasn't in a panic to what's the next chapter of my life. So the next couple of years after I retired, CBC asked me if I'd like to commentate. Felt natural for me. I'm a massive fan of track and field as well as a participant. I just really enjoyed the sport. So I did a little commentating, but I migrated into another one of my curious interests around finance. I migrated into that industry quite organically through introductions from individuals. My massage therapist's wife's cousin was a branch manager at an investment bank here in Calgary. And again, I've just been such a fortunate recipient of coaching, parenting, mentoring. I've just been so lucky. And I, in this kind of second half of my life, in as an adult life, I got into finance, and I was mentored by a really interesting, successful finance guy who's still working at it here in Calgary. But we resonated morally, ethically, psychologically, academically. We resonated in how we looked at investing and investments and companies. And so that was a really nice transition for me, that I could pour myself into something else that was really intriguing. It wasn't as physical, obviously, as decathlon, but incredibly mentally stimulating. I thought of it as fun to analyze companies and invest in companies. And that was the genesis of my finance career, which I've been at for the last 20 plus years, at a few different investment firms, a few different investment banks. The first one was based out of Calgary. Second one was based out of San Fran. The third one was based out of Calgary, focused on oil and gas. So I've had good exposure to a multitude of different sectors and industries and entrepreneurs that have really fed my appetite for interesting, dynamic businesses and projects. And so capital markets, wealth management, banking, super stimulating. But we'll call it the last 5 or 7 years, I've really focused on working with driven entrepreneurs. So it's my version of coaching. So instead of athletes and coaching athletes for their high performance, I work with entrepreneurs and help them achieve, some of their goals, which are typically monetary and market share and valuation, which is just as interesting as athletic performance, in my opinion, and to help lay a groundwork and a base of accounting and legal and board work and regulatory compliance. So that's all part of the package that a coach would offer an athlete, an advisor would offer an entrepreneur. So that's what I've been focusing on. And I stumbled into a couple of really intriguing projects, mainly around technology and innovation, and specifically artificial intelligence. And the last 3.5 years, I've been focusing on an AI project that delivered artificial intelligence infrastructure in a very unique fashion. AI is deployed on GPUs. GPUs used to be used for gaming. Now they're used for processing a high amount of data. So GPUs, big computers, run in big data centers, which we call the cloud. They generate a lot of heat, use a lot of electricity. So the group that I got invited in to help kind of mold and build a company just turned that whole idea of how we work with high performance compute and how we cool it, particularly, turned it upside down, and decided to take all the hardware compute, squish it together tightly where it generates even more heat. But to dissipate that heat, we immerse it in a dielectric fluid, a non-conductive, non-corrosive oil. And that oil dissipates the heat 1,200 times more efficiently than blowing air conditioning across a fan over a server. So we've stumbled into this cool little mousetrap that is, to say it's relevant in today's society is a massive understatement. Yeah. AI is really having a moment, and is going to continue to have a moment for the rest of our lifetime. And we've just built a modular liquid immersion cooled data center that helps unlock and unleash the full power of AI in a much more efficient infrastructure protocol. So that's a lot, but that's
So
kind of what I'm up to, and because of that, I get exposed to incredibly interesting projects that have AI attached to it.
are you, you very seemingly purposely didn't mention the name of the company. Are you avoiding that?
Not necessarily. Denver DataWorks. It's based out of Calgary. It's a B2B business, really running under the radar, well financed. I helped out with that to get things off the ground, but things are going extraordinarily well. And right place, right time, right team, right product. Just one of those serendipitous scenarios where, as far as a company is concerned, it's a LeBron James, Michael Jordan shows up every once in a blue moon, and I think created a pretty interesting company here in Calgary. That's one of those, once or twice in a lifetime type of things that appear, and incredibly relevant to where we are in this point in history and how it relates to AI particularly. So it's been exciting to watch help and watch that grow. It's just fascinating.
And you've explained the technical configuration of this to me a little bit more. So just for everyone listening, imagine a big shipping container, a long one. I think your units are about 60 feet-ish, Mike? Yeah. So 60 feet. But imagine a 60-foot shipping container, and the big shipping containers you see in the world right now today are 40. So just a little bit bigger than a normal shipping container. It's a fully bespoke shipping container. They don't just take shipping containers and convert them. This is the configuration looks like that kind of cube. And then inside of it, it's fully bathed in fluid with all the compute sitting inside of it, with giant cables running out basically in and out to drive power and data in and to take data out. It is shocking. It's shocking. If you've ever been into a large data center building, and we've seen them on TV, and they are exactly what they look like on TV. They're these cavernous, giant buildings in the middle of nowhere where land is cheap and electricity is cheap. Those are the two things that tell you where to build data centers. Mm-hmm. What Denver and Mike and the team have done is basically take one of those giant data centers, and you could replace a huge data center with, let's say, and this number isn't correct, but let's say 6 or 7 of these small things. Yeah. They don't need real foundations, although, you pour a nice cement pad for it. Probably not a bad idea. Keep it real level, hold some of the load. But these things just sit on the earth. They're super stable. Gravity holds them down real good. You need to run power in, get the data out, and that's it. You're done. And you can do this in a footprint that is exponentially smaller. And then even more importantly, you can distribute these because they are easy to move. I believe you guys have a prototype, and I won't say where it is, but you guys have a prototype set up in Calgary, which is literally sitting in the parking lot of one of your large partners. And it just sits there as this sort of black boxed thing. Yeah. But it's sitting there crushing out AI algorithms all day. No one knows what it is. There's no noise. There's no pollution. There's none of that. There's no, nothing comes out of this thing except data in, data and power in, and data out. It's phenomenal that this is something that exists. So leads me back to a conversation I had with Lyndon Cormack and a bunch of other sort of Calgary guys that have been super successful. Just another amazing thing out of Calgary. So go Calgary.
The city and the province really astounds me with the level of successful individuals doing really interesting, relevant things. And certainly I'm proud to be associated with a company that's done that. But to your point, Jamie, it really is fascinating to see that happen in real time with a multitude of entrepreneurs. It's inspiring, and everyone points to Silicon Valley, from the last kind of, call it 40, 50 years of tech innovation, and certainly It is the epicenter of that world, but it's just incredibly inspiring to see that bleeding out into other kind of geographies, and Calgary is certainly one of them. Edmonton has an aspect of that with the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, a big institute dedicated to AI. There's a Vector Institute in Toronto, same thing. Mila is another large scale institute dedicated to AI in Montreal. So Canada punches above its weight in this burgeoning, relatively new industry and sector. It's been around for a long time, as far as decades are concerned, but it's really coming into its own with the application of these large language models and Chat GPT, and it's just scratching the surface of helping support optimizing how we live and how work and jobs are done, and where human capital is necessary and where it's not, because the computers can do it better, stronger, faster in a multitude of cases. So we're just at a really interesting inflection point in history. Like, to be blunt, I'm not over dramatizing it. It's just it's literally going to change the world, kind of like this little thing called the internet or the printing press or the internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
This AI thing is really going to change how the world operates, and it's just so exciting and fascinating to be involved in a company that's helping lead that charge, and seeing the additional companies that utilize those services and how they're going to help change the world. Hopefully, knock on wood, for the better. There's going to be yin and yang, good and bad, with AI, just as there is with everything that humans touch. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I can just see the net positive benefits clearly. And psychologically, I kind of negate the bad things that are going to happen. But biotech, biopharma, saving people's lives, educational aspects of delivering educational experiences via AI, like these things are going to really help human beings and the human race. it's just
Yeah, it's stunning. And just like as validation points for people, and again, I don't know what's public knowledge and what isn't public knowledge, but you guys have partnered with some of the largest companies on the planet with this. This isn't just a little Calgary thing that two guys from Calgary are talking about saying it's super awesome. You have some of the largest hardware manufacturers in the world partnered in. You have some of the largest software companies in the world working with you. You have some of the largest banks in the world interested in you. This is like an unbelievable tech story. It's interesting because it's mechanical tech. Like, you guys aren't the AI company. You're not pumping, like, you're creating infrastructure at a level that people could not think their way and get to, which is really interesting. Like, and when you say it, it's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? That's a great way to, like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious, but it's also not very hard. Like, it's not very easy to do. Those containers don't build themselves, and they're complicated, and they have their own implications with, like, you can't have leaks, and you have to control heat very, very, very well. And they have to deliver, but you guys have been able to deliver on all promises across the board. And now you've got even larger partners that will help you deliver on those even better, which is shockingly cool.
Yes.
Like, it's so cool.
It really is, Jamie. And, Alberta is really well known for hydrocarbon extraction, oil and gas, pipelines, and there's a tremendous amount of ingenuity and innovation in that world. And I think a lot of that innate ability of Western Canada to deploy on that is leaking over into this world too. And it's incredibly innovative. It's incredibly dynamic. It changes literally every day. We've seen the drama and politics unfold over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure how many of the listeners would have followed Sam Altman and the CEO of OpenAI and ChatGPT and being fired and rehired. It's a brand new world that we're kind of stumbling into, but it's so fascinating, so interesting, and again, I get super excited about it just because I've been exposed to it at a depth that most people, will never have the opportunity to see. And I've just been able to, it's kind of like my version of the Olympic Village. I'm in the village. I get to hang out, meet other athletes, and see what they're good at. And that's 10,000 of the 7 billion people on the planet. And Denver DataWorks is one of the handful of, small, elite, transformational groups and teams and applications in this burgeoning world of AI, which is like I said before, is going to change the world. So I'm behind the gates, which is super interesting, right? To the people you meet and the experiences you have and the applications that are being implemented are just fascinating. Just fascinating.
You're behind the gates and you're also behind the paywall. So congratulations, because I call shotgun right now when you are flying around in your first helicopter. I get shotgun and I get second or third ride. You can take your family for a couple rides.
Yeah.
I am the next up. Okay.
Perfect. We'll commute you out to Cochrane to Calgary real quick.
Yeah, we can land directly on my tennis court. I made sure the side fences were low enough that the rotors won't destroy them. So that's perfect. Mike, thank you. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I love your enthusiasm for everything. I love how you've been able to draw like your all the stuff you've learned in sport. All is who you are now, and it drives you forward. It's honest, it's gritty, it's naked. Like it's just, it is what it is. There's no pretenses against it. There's no bullshit. It's just like this. It's such a clean and refreshing, honest thing. And I see it from my high-end athlete friends who've transitioned into business. Everyone approaches it very analytical and clean, but happy. And, like life is a great thing, where I definitely don't see that out of just sometimes like the classic Six Sigma ninja sort of consultant style people that went through Ivy League and never, there's places for these people for sure, but your path is very cool. How you got to where you are and how much you've learned. And obviously everyone who's listening is looking at this and going, Mike Smith's involved in like AI.
How did that happen?
How did that happen?
Exactly.
I'll tell you, it's just an enthusiasm for being curious about life. And that's exactly how that happened.
You got it.
And so,
and just surround yourself with people like yourself, because I think like attracts like, and you and I, this is a great example of one of our many conversations we've had over the years. But curiosity is such a big aspect of so many successful people that I know, including yourself. The big part of their lives is that curious factor, and I'm really drawn to curious people doing curious things. And some of them fail miserably and are like completely blow up, but some of them just rocket ship, and both are. You learn as much from the other, but they're always fascinating to watch and experience in real time, and how humans do their thing, and it's a lovely thing to be involved with. It really is.
Yeah, I love it, Michael. Thank you. I hope to have you back. I'd like to chat once you guys get down the pipeline a little farther with Denver. I'd love to see what this continues and looks like, because it's an interesting story. And I know that you've got 1,000 other more private dealings in the work that on a personal level, I'm semi-privy to. So as those things come to light, it would be really cool to chat on just a little bit more of a business level and to see that stuff as well. So it'd be really cool. So buddy, thank you. You're the best. Big hugs to your family for me. And we will be having lunch at our favorite soup spot in the next couple of weeks before Christmas. Okay.
Can't wait.
Everyone, we recorded this before Christmas, so cat's out of the bag. This is going to show up sometime in February. We haven't even had our Christmas drinks yet. So there we go. Michael, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Same. Cheers.
Thanks, bro. Bye.
Bye.